as a member of the committee, what would be the focus of your questions? How would you go after what you were looking for?
Well, tomorrow, of course, Lawrence, we're going to hear from 4 of the police officers who were there that day. And I think that's a wonderful way to start. We want to hear about what they saw, what they heard, the injuries they've suffered and continue to suffer as a result of this. I think it's really important to debunk some of the myths that have formed up already around January 6th, that the people there were just ordinary tourists. And so I think hearing firsthand from them will be very important. But then moving on, I think it's important to understand about the intelligence failures, why we didn't collect information and then share it to the right representatives. And then when the response came, why it was that there was such a lengthy delay while we waited for the National Guard to show up. I think those are important. And of course, the role that the disinformation campaign about the big lie that President Trump actually won the election played in motivating those who were there that day.
Let's listen to what Adam Schiff said about this today. He's going to be a member of this committee.
We will follow the evidence wherever it leads and to whomever it leads. So I think once we're composed and we're getting close, we'll be defining the scope and the order and the priority of our witnesses. And I don't want to get ahead of that process.
Do you expect to have to issue subpoenas?
Yes, I do. We want to make sure, for example, when we request documents, that we get all of them, that we don't have people withholding information because it's a voluntary request. So, yes, I favor going to subpoenas and going to them early. And with witnesses, I expect that some of them will be reluctant to testify and they'll need to be compelled. So that's certainly my expectation.
So, Barbara, that's a big strategic point for any congressional committee is to subpoena or not to subpoena. If you subpoena, you run into the possibility of a protracted legal battle trying to enforce that subpoena, which is why Congress always prefers to get the witnesses without going through the subpoena process. But it seems like Adam Schiff possibly has learned his lesson about dealing with the Trump side of the world and that it's going to take subpoenas.
Well, I think one of the lessons learned from the Trump administration is if you're going to use subpoenas eventually, you should serve them early because, as you mentioned, it can be a protracted process going through the courts. One of the things our courts are not great at is moving quickly. And so if the committee is serious about getting these documents in time to be able to use them to question witnesses, they probably should be serving the subpoenas right at the front end so that if they have to go to court to enforce them, they can do that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and that seems to be what Congressman Schiff is saying. It sounds like that's probably a consensus of this committee at this point. How would you see it in terms of scheduling? They're going to begin with this is what we saw on that day tomorrow by police officers who were there, who were being attacked. They will establish this was full of violence. This was a real attempt to change the actual process that was going on in the Senate and the House. They were trying to change the election. They were talking about hanging the vice president, all of those things, which is going to be a necessary fact base for someone like Donald Trump, who's going to be saying, whether he testifies or not to this committee, he'll be saying during this investigation that those people were there in love, as we've heard him say, that they were there peacefully, that they were full of love. That message is going to be coming out constantly from Donald Trump during this investigation.
Yes, and that's why I think it's important to get the facts on the record and debunk some of those myths. You know, in the series of questions that we put together in the piece that you mentioned, we used the 9/11 Commission report as our template, and that talked a lot, certainly, about what happened on 9/11, but then it went back in time to look at what were the origins and the planning that occurred. I think it would be also important for this select committee to go back. They may start with January 6th, but I think it's important to look at the planning and the conversations and the groundwork that may have been laid leading up to that to trigger people to be there that day. You know, we know that Donald Trump, for example, sent out a tweet urging people to come to Washington on January 6th. Will be wild, he said in that tweet. What role did that play in radicalizing some of those people to actually show up on January 6th? And then, like the 9/11 Commission, I think it's also important to look forward. What have we learned from this episode that we need to change to do differently in this country with respect to violent extremism, the use of social media to facilitate and recruit people? people and the use of disinformation to motivate people to acts of violence because they believe their country is being stolen from them. I think all of that is really important to first chronicle and then assess so that we can go forward.
This is one of those congressional investigations that intersects with criminal investigations, including the now hundreds of people who've been arrested and criminally charged with invading the Capitol. Some of those people may at some point give evidence, actually say under oath what they believed Donald Trump wanted them to do and what they believed Donald Trump meant when he said, you know, we're all going to walk down to the Capitol together. And so this is one of those things where they may at some point get lucky because that testimony comes out in judicial process on time, or they might have to wait a while to hear what those kinds of witnesses might actually say.
Yeah, so as these tracks are proceeding in parallel fashion, you're right in that sometimes one can assist the other. You might learn about something in one form that can be used in the other. But there is also the risk that you could interfere with the criminal process. So, you know, the most famous example of that is when Congress immunized Oliver North, heard his testimony, and then later ruled that a court later ruled that his prosecution was tainted because the prosecutors had heard his testimony in that congressional hearing. So they have to be mindful of not immunizing people that might be facing criminal charges down the road.
And Barbara, what do you see as the reasonable timetable for a congressional investigation like this?
I think it will take many months to hear from all the different witnesses. You know, I would put them in several categories. Tomorrow, some of the first responders. I think we need to hear from the intelligence community. I think we need to hear from the Defense Department as to why the response was so slow. I think we need to hear from officials at the White House and probably some expert witnesses about domestic extremism, about disinformation, and about social media. And so pulling all of those groups together, I think, could take several months.